Mr. Wyatt, I'm delighted to hear about how blockchains can improve everyday processes and empower consumers with new technology. But new technology often comes with new risks, and some of which being made clear only after widespread deployment. What potential problems could you see arising from increased use of blockchain technology? And then a follow-up, what steps could this committee take to minimize those problems?
I think the biggest risk that we have here in our country is not doing anything, and I'm not implying that we are. This committee is a great example of the work that we're doing here, but I would say with a sense of urgency so that we can make sure that we are leading and we are the pioneers and we are placing kind of the consumer protections that we need to put in place. So my concern largely would stem around us continuing to not do anything or act swiftly enough and what implications that could have.
Okay. And then I guess, Mr. Wilder, a follow-up question is related to this, quite frankly. In addition to me being a member of this subcommittee, I'm also the vice chair of the subcommittee for Energy and Commerce on Oversight and Investigations. In your opinion, what balance should exist between encouraging innovation by technology startups and government oversight and regulation? Meaning, what role do you see government playing in shaping the future of blockchain technology, if any?
Yeah, I don't know that necessarily I would say that the government is responsible for shaping it, but I think it's really important that we establish guidelines, regulations, and rules of the road so that there's clarity, so that people feel comfortable that they are capable and enabled to innovate in this country.
And then Professor Sudler and Professor Reyes, when trying to anticipate the potential risks of blockchain technology and how we can mitigate them, I think it's also important to discuss regulatory authority. As we have heard from all of you today, blockchains are a multi-use technology. So we must make sure that regulatory authority is clear. What is the best way to prevent unfair or deceptive acts or practices, ensure data security, and regulate a new technology, or is it too early to regulate?
That's a very bundled question.
It is.
But if you take a look at how we treated the internet in its early days, we were fairly hands-off to allow it to innovate. And I think that's very important for the blockchain to continue to do that. Let's keep in mind that the blockchain is only about 15 years old. It's a teenager. Let it be a teenager. And let it come to some degree of maturity before we talk about huge regulations. Having said that, though, there are industry-specific standards that we have to take a look at, things like healthcare, where HIPAA laws are in place, and the privacy of our data is very critical. So we need to look at this on an industry-by-industry basis to see how blockchains are being used and whether or not, from an industry perspective, we need to put some guardrails on how blockchains could potentially threaten our information, our lives.
Ms. Reyes.
Thank you. So I do want to make sure it's clear for the record that this is not an unregulated industry. It's actually quite heavily regulated. I've been a blockchain lawyer since around 2011, and most of my counseling was on regulatory matters, right? So it's quite heavily regulated. The problem is often that the regulations that apply aren't entirely clear, at least as applied to the specific subset that folks are interested in. I think we see this largely in the securities industry at the moment, in securities law regulation. I think the key to making sure that such things, such clarity is provided in the regulatory framework is to go through the rulemaking process, an open process whereby rulemaking is issued, people get a chance to comment on it, and then clear rules of the road are provided. Because many of the existing laws and regulations that we have do apply to the activity undertaken using the technology. What I think would be a detriment to the United States legal system is if laws targeted the technology or the software itself and said, the blockchain must look like this. And you may only build a protocol with these features. that would not be helpful. I also concur with Mr. Schumann's earlier remarks that targeting the developers themselves, particularly open source developers, is not particularly helpful. Particularly recognizing that blockchain protocols are not the only open source software that we rely upon on a daily basis. If you use a computer today, it's likely that you used some piece of open source software while you did so. So those are my comments on your question.
Well, thank you, and I thank all of you for coming here today. Now I call on my colleague, Ms. Kamick, for 5 minutes of questioning.